I've finished the repair to this section here. It's now the right width in there. It was a little bit shorter because of rust damage, and I've also put a different angle on it to fit the new mouth. So that's been done. Now these are all right, both sides. The mouth is now fitting around the new panel, but I keep chasing areas that I need to rectify to get everything to fit properly. And the final challenge is to actually get the, I think they call it the lower air duct panel, which is this one in here, which when this bonnet is inverted, that's actually on the bottom. It bolts across between the two inner balances. Now what I've found, as I keep measuring this new panel against the old, I keep finding differences all the time. Now I did mention, or if I didn't, I'm going to mention now, the old panel, when it fits on, slopes back, and slopes back a fair way, and it means that the original metal on the air duct fits within the within the mouth, so this section slides over the other lower panel on the original panel. Now when I drop the original panel on, it works out that I don't need that additional metal on the original panel. I do need it on the new panel because it sits further forward. So it's sitting further forward like this, and to exaggerate, the original panel leans back further. Now the problem I now have, having reshaped all of that and fitting all this is fitting nicely, is that this lower air duct panel now doesn't slide into the lower pan at the right angle. It actually sits up. Now if you can imagine, the new panel comes across at this angle. So now this is sitting up out of this furthest edge, probably by 12 mil. So it's actually sitting up, it's not fitting under the lower panel. It's not sliding under the mouth there. So it's actually sitting down like that. So a few more measurements, and actually what I've found in addition to all the other things I've mentioned is that the opening is actually wider. So if I put a rule between the centre panel on that piece of metal there with the equivalent on the lower panel up here, it's at least 20 mil higher than the original panel. So the original panel would be sitting down about here, maybe not quite 20 mil, but it sits down there. The new panel sits up here. So there's no way in the world I can get these flanges to line up with the new depth of the new panel. I knew I had to alter this lower panel here. That was always going to happen because of what I'd already found. So this panel I couldn't reuse anyway. I have to remake it for a combination of reasons. One is that this rear end sits further forward because of this panel, and now everything else sits further forward, so even if I could fit this panel in, it's short. It doesn't line up. And as I say, the original lower pan sat back further, which meant that this was covered. You can see where it's been sitting under the original lower pan, so it fitted along there. This one, if I can even get it in, is sitting out like this. It's all in the wrong place. But even if I remake the panel, which I'm going to do anyway, it's going to be sitting too high. As you can see, it doesn't line up with this. It has to line up with that. This slides into the lower pan, and that should also slide into the lower pan. So the flange has got to be lifted. Now, it doesn't have to be lifted at the rear end of the valance. It's the front end. The rear end is fine. It fits up, lines up with everything it needs to line up with. So what I now have to do is to remove these flanges and weld new flanges in the right position. And I'll just fold some up. So it's got to now come up and line up basically with this. So when this lower piece is put in, it will slide in under the lower pan as does this. So anyway, back to the drawing board. I'll make that alteration, and then everything should slide in and fit up with the new panel. The alternative, of course, is to cut all of this and reshape that panel, which I'm not going to do. I'll make everything fit. It won't alter anything further back on the valance, it just alters the position at the front. When it's done, everything will fit in as it originally fitted on the old lower pan, but apart from all the additional work, I guess I get the benefit of a slightly deeper opening on the mouth. Whether you'll notice that or not, I don't know, but that's just the way it's going to be if I'm going to use this, which I am, if I'm going to use the replacement panel. Anyway, what's a little bit more welding? I've already cut the other piece off on the other side. What I'll do is I'll cut this one off, and to position it I'll put everything back together. These are, once again, everything I cut is oversized. I'll fit them with clamps along the valance and get the right position before I cut the final shape of these. And then I'll spot weld them in, double check it, and when that's right then I'll do the final weld. I've repositioned the flanges. They're higher now at the front end to take into account the slightly larger or deeper mouth. I've reshaped the horns to match up with that. I've done the same on both sides. So I'm now about to just drop the bottom pan on and see how it all fits, but it should be very, very close. Now I've managed to get this front end to fit. The horn fits around the mouth, which is good. The bottom air duct will slide in and also fit the mouth, so that's good. So that's right now on both sides. That side I've actually shaped a bit more. This one still needs a little bit of shaping around there, not much, but it's close. What I'm now going to do is to bolt this up and then keep working towards the rear of the bonnet. So once I've bolted this up, then I've got to try and see how the headlight diaphragms fit. So that's the next job. So I'll just bolt the lower pan down. I'll bolt it to the it's actually self-tappers, but I'll screw the bottom pan into the valance, so that's all in one piece, one solid piece. I've got some spaces under the flanges, the bonnet flange, the inner sill flanges. So I've got hopefully the right height there. I've set that about I think it's about an eighth of an inch or so. So that'll give me some clearance for the adhesive, but I'm nowhere near the adhesive application yet. I'm still trying to fit the panels. So it's taken a long time to do this, and I guess if I'd realised that the mouth was slightly different from the original, it would have been a lot quicker. But anyway, I've now solved that. Everything now fits, which is good, and I'll move towards the rear. I'm just trying to fit this headlight diaphragm in place. It's close to a fit. Haven't put the flanges on it yet, but I'm just trying to line up all of the holes. The fixing points, of course, around the air duct. There's two there. There's another two up on there which screw into the actual inner valance. There's also one down the bottom there that screws also into the air duct. So there's quite a few fixing points, and of course the ones that are causing the problem at the moment are the ones across the top. They're fitting alright in that end, but they're just a little bit out of alignment on this end. So I'm just following through with checking between the dimensions of the old diaphragm and this one. There are some slight differences, maybe enough just to stop the fitting, but I'll just keep working on it. As I say, it's very close, but not close enough at this stage. Now, I've had some interesting developments in trying to fit this diaphragm, and they relate to the two replacement panels I have. One is the lower pan here, and the other is the diaphragm itself. Now, problem with the lower panel, this one here, just move around a bit, is that when this diaphragm sits on the lip of the lower panel here, the holes don't line up, and in fact what appears to be is that they're sitting up too high, particularly on this side. Now, when I've had a careful look at the lower panel itself, I can see why. What's happening is when I drop the diaphragm up on the ledge here, it actually sits up on this side. It sits up on the flange that bolts to the front wing. The this flange is sitting too high. It needs to drop down. So this panel can sit flat. Now, even when it sits flat, I haven't checked it yet, I still don't think it's quite lining up with the holes, but it's certainly a lot closer. So that's the first problem. The second problem is related to the diaphragm itself. Now, where I'm also having difficulty is getting, it's been nice, just fell down, getting the panel to fit nicely around the air duct. Now, it doesn't, and what I've found is that the cutout in the diaphragm is actually slightly smaller than the dimensions of the air duct. So when you try and push it across and have this flange fitting with the outside of the duct and that flange fitting with the valance, there's a gap between the flange there and the valance. In other words, it doesn't push across enough. When I've checked that against the original panel, yes, there's probably about a 3 to 4 mil difference. So what I have to do is to move this flange, and I'm doing that by gradually reshaping the elbow there and trying to gain the additional width. Now, I'm only part way through that, still got a bit more hammer and dolly work to do on that, but it's getting closer. So I've got to change not only this panel but some parts of the top panel, and even then I'm not sure whether I can get these holes to line up precisely. Now it just so happens when I drop the old panel in, they do line up. So anyway, a bit more work to do, as usual. Trying to get everything to fit together is a slow process, and one small problem leads to another, but hopefully I've found all of the difficulties and I can try and address them. Now I've managed to lower the flange so it lines up with this, so that means the panel will sit flat across the two flanges. The other issue I've found though is that the holes don't line up. When I say the holes don't line up, two issues with the holes not lining up. The first issue is that these have got captive plates on the back for the self-tapper screws, but they're not welded in the centre of the hole. That one's off centre, that one sits high, that one's central, this one's to the right, and that one's central. So that's not too bad. On the other side, similar problem, except I don't think any of them line up properly. That's slightly to the right, that's up high, that's to the left, that's to the left, and that one's a long way to the left. So that's one issue. The second issue, even with the flange at the right level, the holes don't line up. So they're sitting too high on this end, on this side. Actually not as much there, but sitting high there as well. So they're sitting high. Also on this side, this panel isn't straight. It's bent inwards. Now, I don't think I can alter that. It looks like it's spot welded in that position and it's warped inwards. Now that panel probably has how much gap at the end, hang on. Oh, a good 5mm warpage in, so that doesn't line up. So that's another problem I've got to address. The other side isn't so bad, but they still don't line up. The holes, the hole on this panel's to the left, that one's not so bad. That needs to come across to the left, that needs to come across to the left, so does that. That one's fine, and that one there is fine. It screws in. This panel also has a bit of warpage in towards there, so this panel doesn't sit flat. I think what I'll do initially is to get everything to line up in terms of the holes, which means elongating not only the holes in this panel but also the holes in the panel underneath, because the screw plates aren't welded central to the hole, you can't get a self-tapper in. So I've got to file those out as well. So there's a fair bit of work to do before I can get back to trying to fit these panels on. I guess it is what it is, and now I've got to try and resolve the issue without creating more problems. I'm still fine-tuning the fit on this side. The diaphragm I've got pretty much right now. I've had to alter a few things on that. I've managed to get the screw holes lined up with the underpan, so that's okay, but it's still sitting a little bit too low at the wheel arch here. What I'm looking for is any difference between the alignment of this section here with the corresponding piece on the underpan. Now, just to make sure I get everything right, I've decided to drop in the sugar scoop on this side, so I know that the shape of the guard is right and the levels up here are right. So I've just put that in. I'll tighten that up in a minute, so then that's fixed. I'll know then that all of that is in the correct position for the sugar scoop, and at this stage the clecos go in quite okay, so that's alright. What I'm finding is that it appears that when I put the bottom pan on here, it's sitting up high just at the end there, and yes, I can bolt it down and that pulls that whole piece down, but what it also does is pull the whole rear section of the pan down. That's not much, but it's enough to make the fit of the diaphragm difficult, particularly when you put the flanges on, and it ends up that there's basically no gap between the flange and the guard, and also not so much the guard, the centre section. It's where it's really quite tight and it needs to be lifted higher. So I've checked the flange on the underpan, and it's not level. So I've just put a straight edge across that, and might even be able to see that. It's a bit dark down in here. Let's get a screwdriver. just in here there's a gap. Now I don't mind a bit of a gap there, that's fine. In here there's a gap. Now I don't mind a bit of a gap there, as that will pull down, that's fine. And there's a little bit of a gap all the way along here, but that's fairly even, but it drops significantly towards the last few inches. And that's where I noticed when I dropped the pan on the section here, it's actually sitting up a bit high. And as I say, yes, I can tighten it down, and it will pull down. To some extent this is pulling up and the other is pulling down, but probably the net result is that it's dropping a little bit on this side. That may be causing the problem with the lack of gap on the flange for the headlight diaphragm. So what I'll do is I'll look at this and see if I can, I can alter that. I can raise, just add some metal to the end there to make that lift higher. I mean, I've already had to add metal around the wheel arch and the top end here, so I've added metal into that to get it to line up with this. So I just may have to add a bit of metal to that to get it a little bit higher, or in the case of when it fits, a little bit lower when it fits onto the wing. Anyway, before I do that, I'll just make sure that that's the case. That's why I put the headlight scoops in, to make sure this is right, and that's pretty well straight along there. So that's not so much the problem, but certainly when I put the two together there is going to be a gap at the end. As I say, it's going to sit up, exaggerated, it's going to sit up like that. It will pull down, but I'm actually forcing the panel down, which then forces the join with the inner valance, because that underpan is bolted or screwed, bolted and screwed onto the inner valance. So if the whole thing is pulled down, that's putting pressure on all of this and pushing it down into the centre section. Anyway, I'll just keep checking things and then make a decision as to how much I'll have to alter that end section there.